What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video. Today we're going over the Magicka Dragonknight DPS. So the Mag DK has seen a bit of a shift in its meta just due to the fact that the Asylum Staff was nerfed in Greymoor. So the current build that a lot of people have been using, which primarily uses the Perfected Asylum Staff, really isn't as viable as it used to be. It's still relatively strong, but it definitely pales in comparison to some of the newer setups that Mag DKs are currently running in Greymoor. So for those of you guys who have been running the old setup, we're using the Perfected Asylum Staff, you guys are going to have to transition over to some other build instead in Greymoor. Now the good thing is, for those of you guys who are running Elf Bane, despite the fact that it doesn't work with Zaan anymore, you are still able to run it with something like Embers, and still get really good DPS out of it. So despite the fact that the Mag DK has definitely seen the death of the Perfected Asylum build, it still is a fairly powerful Magicka DPS and is a contender for the top Magicka DPS spot right now in a raid environment. Now, like the rest of our build videos coming out throughout the rest of May and into June, we will not be going over any sort of gear. Gear is reserved for the Magicka DPS gear video, which should be popping up in the upper right hand corner right about now. So make sure to check out that video if you're interested in knowing what sort of gear you should be running as a Mag DK. Now that I said that, though, I will be discussing very briefly the gear that I am running for this parse, just because Mag DKs do have a little bit more options when compared to other classes, and that's mainly because of the use of the set Elf Bane, which is only really useful on Mag DKs and not really anywhere else. But beyond that, primarily we will be going over skills as well as a discussion of the rotation and a demonstration of said rotation. So first, the gear that I'm running for this setup. First of all, if you have Elf Bane, don't worry. Elf Bane is still a very good set to run here, but there are a couple of things you need to keep in mind if you are going to be running Elf Bane. First, try to get the chest and the legs, because those will give you the most resistances. It is very minor. It'll only give you maybe like a 0.5% more mitigation just from resistances that you're getting, but it's still something, so you might as well try to min-max that way. Then you also have to make sure that your Monster Helm set is in light. Plus, if you're wearing Elf Bane, you're going to have to basically limit yourself to running either Embers or Grothdarr. Those are going to be the two best must-helm sets, generically speaking. Domi House can be very good because it is also lengthened by the Elf Bane 5-piece, but because of the way that the hitbox works on that flame circle for Domi House, it's only really good for very large bosses, so it's really only limited to places like Sunspire for right now, because the dragon hitboxes are so big that you're able to get the hitbox of the ring to actually hit the dragons that way. So if you are running Elf Bane, you're going to be limiting yourself to essentially Embers or Grothdarr for the best use of that set. You can still run Molten Inferno, it just won't be buffed by Elf Bane. The DPS I was getting with Molten Inferno was pretty similar to running Embers, so it's up to you which one you would prefer to run. Grothdarr is going to fall a little bit behind, but Grothdarr does have much better cleave potential compared to Embers or Maw. So if you need cleave, go with Grothdarr. If you need single target, go with either Embers if the boss is able to stay in place, or run Maw if the boss is going to be moving around a lot here. The other thing with Elf Bane is, because it is a heavy armor set, you will need to run the jewelry pieces here, so you will need to transmute them because they do come in healthy as a heavy armor set, so you will have to transmute them to Arcane, Infused, or Bloodthirsty. Then our second set is going to be any of the other sets that we talk about in the Magicka DPS gear video. In this instance, it's Siroria, but you can run it with something like Perfected False Gods, for example, or if you're using the Vampire Spamble, you could make use of New Moon Acolyte as well. Just be mindful that I believe it still does boost the health cost of Blood for Blood, so just be very mindful of that if you do decide to use something like New Moon Acolyte. But really, any of the front bar sets, like Mother Sorrow, for example, would be beneficial, but the best sets to run are going to be those with Minor Slayer, so that's going to be either Siroria, like I have here, or Perfected False Gods. Yes, you will not be able to get the full effect of False God while you're on your back bar, but that's not that big of a deal because you should be on your front bar for a pretty long time, especially considering the duration of your back bar dots with Elf Bane running. Now moving on to our skills. For our front bar, we are running the Vampire Spamble, so we are running Blood for Blood. In order to heal from this, you can either run something like Entropy, or you can do something like Burning Embers every couple of casts, because Burning Embers does heal you for a pretty decent chunk of health. So what I like to do is I basically alternate between Blood for Blood and Burning Embers, and you'll see that in the parse. Next we have Engulfing Flames. Then we have Burning Talons. Do keep in mind, I believe this bug still is in effect, that only one Magicka can be running Burning Talons at a time because it counts as a unique debuff on the enemy. So if you are the only Magicka group, you can run Burning Talons with Elf Bane. Otherwise, you can swap this out for something, like I mentioned earlier, Structured Entropy for the heal to help offset the health cost of Blood for Blood, or if you need some cleave damage, you can also run Mystic Orb instead. And we have Inner Light here on the front bar, and Shooting Star for the 2% additional Magicka. Then on our back bar, we are running Eruption, Blockade of Fire. You can also go with Unstable Wall. It's up to you, whichever one you want to run with. Because we're running Blood for Blood, we don't really have an issue with Magic Sustain, so you can run Unstable Wall. Then we have Flames of Oblivion, Barb Trap, or instead of Barb Trap, if you're running running a ranged build, for example, you can also replace this with Channel Acceleration on the Deciduous Order line. Right here. This lasts for a little bit longer period of time, 36 seconds, so you don't have to cast it quite as often, but it does have a cast time, so just be careful of when you use the ability. And then you have a flex spot here. I'm running Inner Light here, but you can run a shield instead, so either morph up the Light Armor shield, so Harness Magicka or Dampen Magic, or if you need to cleave damage, you can also run Mystic Orb instead of Inner Light here. And our ultimate is going to be Standard of Might. So we have this one flex spot here, and then you have a flex spot over here on the front bar if you are one of the Magickas that are not able to run Burning Talons, because you already have Magicka running it in. Now, instead of running Blood for Blood, for those of you guys who don't want to be a vampire, you can run the class Spamble instead, which is going to be Molten Whip. Just be mindful that your Magic Sustain is going to take a pretty heavy hit here. Magickas still have pretty bad sustain without the Asylum Staff. So you might need to use something like a Magicka Backbar enchant, for example, to help yourself sustain, or you might need to do some heavy attacks. In a fully organized raid group where you have Hollow Fang and Sipping Your Blades and all the other sort of sustain bonuses that you can get from support roles, this might not be as big of a deal. You might not necessarily need a heavy attack depending on the duration of the fight, but it's still something to keep in mind here if you do let use Molten Whip. The other spamble that you could run is going to be Force Pulse under the Destro Staff line. Despite the fact that we're not running the Asylum Staff, Force Pulse is still a pretty strong spamble. It's just going to cost you more in terms of sustain compared to Molten Whip. The benefit of running Force Pulse is that you do have the potential to get a little bit more cleave damage if you have in a trash fight scenario versus Molten Whip, which is just purely single target damage. So just keep that in mind if you're going to be running Force Pulse or Molten Whip. You basically are making a little bit of sacrifices either way. Force Pulse with the sustain, Whip with the loss of the potential cleave damage. So that pretty much covers it for all of our skills. Now on to the rotation part of the video. So first we'll quickly demonstrate this on the 3 million dummy here. Basically what it is you're basically keeping an eye on all your dots and essentially keeping them up. Now if you're running Blood for Blood, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but basically you're going to want to alternate running Blood for Blood and burning Embers depending on what your health is at. In an actual raid environment, you should have heal over times being able to heal you through the damage that you're taking when you're casting Blood for Blood, so this shouldn't be an issue. But if it does become an issue and you do see your health going down and your healers are dead, or you don't have any hots on you, for example, then you can replace one cast of Blood for Blood for Burning Embers because it does heal you for 75% of the damage done, and it is a lot of damage that you're dealing. So 75% of this total damage is about 25k for the total damage, so you take 75% of that, and that ends up being basically you're maxing out your health that way, especially because this is unbuffed, so with buffs you're dealing even more damage, and it does heal you for a percentage of the increased damage there. So your rotation pretty much is going to be looking like this. Always start off with try to get Flames of Oblivion up. Sometimes you can cast this pre-fight, sometimes it's before. When you enter the fight, it's up to you whether you want to do it or not, how you want to do it. But you always want to open up with your Source of Minor Force, either Rearming Trap or Channel Acceleration. Put down all your dots, and you're just going to do Blood for Blood. And then when your dots run out, you basically recast your dots. Your dots do have varying durations, so you are going to have to be a little bit mindful of your dot durations, because it is going to be dynamic just because of the way your dots end up lining up. So basically what you have here is you have 9 seconds on Burning Talons, 19 on both Engulfing Flames and Burning Embers. Then you have Engulfing, backbar, Flames of Oblivion is 15, Blockade is 19, and then you have Eruption, which is 24. So the good thing is, typically speaking, if you're not recasting Burning Embers early because you need the heal, Burning Embers and Engulfing Flames will be pretty much always be paired together. Burning Talons is going to be your shortest duration dot, which is why you have it on the front bar here, so we don't have to necessarily swap for a back bar. That is going to cost us some time, and that is going to cost us some spambles. So always have Burning Talons here on the front part here because it is the shortest duration dot. And then Eruption is the one that really throws things off because of the 24-second duration compared to the 19 for Blockade, 15 for Flames of Oblivion. Your back bar dots in general all don't really line up very well. Barbed Trap, for example, lasts for 18, so you can see it is definitely offset by a fair amount here. So if you're on PC, I highly recommend picking up some sort of add-on like Action Duration Reminder, like Surrender, just to keep track of all of the dots that you're running somehow on the screen, so that way you can re-up them with minimal downtime. Now, if you do need to have some downtime on your dots, the most important ones to maintain are going to be Engulfing Flames for the additional flame damage debuff, and Blockade of Fire for obviously the Maelstrom staff buff. And then you also have Barbed Trap. Try to maintain this as best you can, or whatever your source of Minor Force is, because Minor Force is a fairly strong DPS buff that way. The other dots can be run out. So for example, Eruption, Flames of Oblivion, Burning Embers, Burning Talons, those could all be dropped for a few seconds, as long as you're able to maintain Engulfing Flames and Blockade and Rearming Trap, or Barbed Trap I should say. Then in terms of Execute, Magicka don't have an Execute, so you just keep up the rotation throughout Execute. And then in terms of Ultimate, always try to use your Standard when and where you can, unless the fight is going to be so short that you're not going to be able to make use of Standard. So Standard lasts for 25 seconds with Elf Bane, 20 seconds without. So if you're going to be in a trash fight that lasts for 10 seconds, there's obviously no point in running Standard because the actual damage it deals per second is actually fairly low. The benefit of running Standard is for the additional damage done buff that you get while you are within the Standard. So also be mindful of using Standard against the mobile boss because the boss might move out of your Standard, causing you to move. So 1, you're not dealing damage anymore within the Standard, and 2, you're not getting the damage done buff because you're no longer within the area of the Standard of Might. So for example, in Cloud Rest, where Zamaja teleports around fairly often, you might not want to run Standard. Instead, you're going to want to run Shooting Star as your main ultimate. So just be mindful of that before deciding whether to run Standard as your main ultimate, or Shooting Star, or even the Desert Staff ulti instead. Now that we've gone over pretty much everything we need to know, let's go ahead and do a demonstration of the rotation itself here. And here we go. I didn't drop the Standard. Didn't register. Now, because obviously I don't have a healer, I will need to recast Burning Embers to heal myself up. But again, like I said, in an actual raid environment, you will have a healer that will hopefully be healing you constantly throughout the trial, so you'll need to replace a cast of Blood for Blood with Burning Embers. One thing I will mention here is that there is a visual bug with Lambris with Elf Bane right now, where the visual itself only lasts the initial 5 seconds. Initial 5 seconds of Lambris doesn't actually last for the full 10 seconds. So even though we're not seeing it, we are still getting the ticks from Lambris, even though the visual is not showing up. Standard didn't go off again. You can see here that by running Blood for Blood, you're basically using our health for a spamble rather than Magicka. Magic Sustain is obviously very nice. Of course, this is going to be dependent on your healers being able to heal you. But Blood for Blood itself actually doesn't cost too much health. It's about 2k health. And honestly, you're not just standing there spamming it, you are also casting other abilities. So when you're not casting Blood for Blood, there's obviously time for your healers to heal you up. So in a parse, it does seem like we're taking a lot of damage from running Blood for Blood, but again, because we have healers in a raid, this isn't going to be an issue in an actual raid environment. Just to give you an idea, your typical healers' illustrious healings should be ticking for about 2.2k or so, with fully buffed and with an appropriate healer build. So it shouldn't be an issue because Blood for Blood right now costs us about 2k health, just over 2k health. So if we have orbs out, we have Lustrous Healing down, we should be able to out-heal the health cost of Blood for Blood fairly easily. And again, my standard didn't go off. This is getting annoying. Or an execute, basically 25% or lower, but we're not changing our rotation because mag decays do not have an execute. One thing you can do in execute as the boss gets closer to dying is you could start dropping some of the less necessary dots. So for example, you might want to consider dropping, let's say, Burning Talons and Eruption in favor of just doing more spambles, just because obviously your spamble is going to be doing more damage than your dots will in that short amount of time. So example right now, because we're getting close to killing it, I'm not going to be re-upping Burning Talons because there's no point in doing so. Oops, I say as I re-up it by accident. But yeah, as we get to the closer to the end of the parse or to the end of the fight where the boss has less health, Burning Talons isn't going to do as much damage as your Blood for Blood spamble will, so that's when you're going to want to drop Burning Talons, potentially Eruption, and just run Blood for Blood instead because you can do more damage that way towards the end. But there we go, just over 87k with the mag decay, obviously lower than the perfected Asylum Staff build from previous patches, but still fairly high up there. Now with Whip, obviously your sustain's going to be hurting a lot more, so you are going to be dependent more on your support classes, support roles for Symphony of Blades, Master's Restoration Staff, so on and so forth. So you might need to heavy attack here and there, and you will see a DPS drop. So I don't have a parse saved, unfortunately, but with Whip, I was losing about 4k to 5k DPS. I believe I was hitting 82 as my highest parse, just over 82k. So running Blood for Blood is definitely going to be the preferred spamble. But again, I understand if people don't want to be a vampire or they're a little bit worried about the health costs for Blood for Blood. Just be mindful that you will be eating a DPS loss and you will be having a harder time sustaining the rotation potentially if you're running Molten Whip or Force Pulse. But that pretty much covers it for this build video. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.